Hello, everyone. I'm here with Kristin today, and this is our 10th episode of Walking the Path. So before we jump into our subject today, we'll just do brief introductions for those of you who haven't watched an episode and don't know anything about us. So we'll just start by introducing ourselves quickly and then jump in. So Kristin, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're most excited about these days?
Hi, Christine. Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here for our 10th episode. And I am a regular person that's on a path of spiritual seeking and truth seeking. And it's a really interesting path, and I love it. And it's full of challenges. And I love working with people and mutually supporting and guiding each other to kind of shed the old layers of wounds and beliefs and fears and all those things to allow us to become better versions of ourselves. And what I'm most excited about right now is the same thing that I'm most confused about right now, which is just where we're at and where we're headed as a collective. And I just love having these discussions because it always gives me more clarity. And I was just saying that we've been hearing from others, but it's inspiring others as well, and that's why I do what I do. So thanks, and maybe you can tell us about you a little bit.
Yeah, so my name is Kristin Yole, and I came from a very academic background. I was a competitive athlete from a young age, very focused, very committed, very performance-based, and got a lot of praise and acknowledgement for how well I performed, which did, compel me to, compete at a high level and all of that. But when my competitive career ended, all of a sudden, I wasn't getting all that praise for my performance, and I really had to reinvent myself or really tune in, well, who am I without this, without what basically held the most meaning for me and how other people recognize me, like who am I without that? And I really had to go deep and surrender deeply within. And for a while it was all about figuring it out and understanding, and after a master's degree in counseling, it was about like, what do I do now? And as I started working in the field, all these intuitive gifts started opening up, and that was very disorienting. And especially around 2010, that was a year of just feeling a lot of overwhelm because I couldn't just stay in a little bubble. I was like exposed to the world. And, as Kristin, you just mentioned the collective energies, it was like they were all just crashing in on me, and the pain and the suffering and the sense of confusion. It was just like, what do I do with all this? So I was really prompted to do a very committed path of inquiry and asking a lot of questions and receiving a lot of support and going to a lot of classes and doing a lot of energy work and all of that. So where that path is taking me is to now, where I do the counseling work when people are wanting help with their mental and emotional body, or what is energy, how does that all work? And just to feel more integrated and whole. A lot of people these days talking about becoming present, living in the now, becoming authentic. And what is that really? How do we become really honest? How do we see clearly? One thing Kristin and I were talking about a little bit before we started the show was how we have these gifts that often haven't been much fun in our early life. The gift of seeing, knowing, and feeling, right? When we just know what's going on with people, we can feel and sense a lot in their system. But if they're not attuned to what's going on for them, then what do we do with that, right? We either try to shut down or suppress the gift or pretend like, oh, you think you're happy? Yes, you're right, you're happy. Instead of really like feel and know what's really going on within ourselves and within others. And it does feel like now is the time for those of us to really accelerate our journey and to become like clear and present and whole, is to become really honest. Like, what are we really feeling? What are we really sensing? Like, what lives in our heart? What's going on in our body? What's going on our mind? Because if we're cloudy, all our interactions will resemble that quality of cloudiness. So we really want to look at, how do we actually become clear so that we can relate in a way that brings joy rather than more pain and suffering.
Yeah, well said. That was a good intro to exactly what the conversation is here. My partner Tan and I were talking about a book that we both read right around the time where we met, and it's called Spiritual Partnership by Gary Zukov. And I think it was probably written in like 2010 or 11, I'm not sure, but it was really around that time period where you said things were shifting, and also really a time for me where things started shifting. And when I read this book, I would highly recommend anyone reading it. I also have the audiobook version, which I've listened to many times. And basically what he says is old paradigm relationships. We supported each other to remain the same. And those were friendships. And we've really outgrown friendships as a species, and we've created this new paradigm in the world of awakening and conscious humans, where friendships are kind of a thing of the past, and what we're moving toward is something called a spiritual partnership. And he says the difference between friendships and spiritual partnerships is that in a friendship, no one wants to rock the boat, but in a spiritual partnership, you're not afraid to swim. And so it's something we talk about a lot, because it's often easy in a lot of ways to allow relationships to be kind of stagnant and stale and remain the same, so that no one's uncomfortable, or that no one's being put on the spot or asked to do anything differently, or people tend to bite their tongue and hold back how they're really feeling about something. And this has been a current challenge for me with some of the people that I'm close to in my life. And I'm looking at myself and going, I have this gift, and thank you, Christine, for pointing out how much of a gift it is, because I've often felt like it can feel a bit like a curse sometimes, and I have this gift where I can read people deeply and what's going on and what their intentions are, and if they have a hidden agenda or something that's less than what they're showing me openly. And it's been an interesting challenge to live with for the last 34 and a half years, and I've been feeling this call and this pull to fully accept and own that gift. And it's a little scary, because when I have stepped fully into it and shared it with others, it's sometimes resulted in losing people from my life, and then I've had to step back and go, is it more beneficial for us as humans and as a collective to keep my mouth shut and allow people that I care about to continue to self-destruct and beat themselves up or continue with harmful patterns toward themselves and others? Or is it worth taking that risk and speaking the truth and saying, this is what I'm observing in you? How can we support each other to make these shifts, to be better versions of ourselves, to let go of that heaviness and that density, to raise the collective vibration and help each other to shift into a more heart-centered existence, and not be afraid, because there's so many of us that want to support each other, to let go of those fears, but it requires a certain level of vulnerability and a certain level of communication and honesty. That's a big one. What you said earlier is like, do we continue to sugarcoat things and beat around the bush a little bit just so it feels cozy and warm, or do we step into our power and just begin to really own these unique gifts that so many of us have? It's not like a superhero special thing anymore. Like, more and more people are sort of coming out of the closet and going like, I have this gift. I don't know what to do with it. Somebody help. So I think that's where people like us that are like, okay, we have these gifts. Who else has these gifts, and how can we all work together as a big team across the planet to, encourage others to peel away the layers and reveal their gift, because I really feel that so many of us have this. And until we're able to peel away the layers of fears and old core beliefs and wounds, we may not even know that these gifts are here.
Yeah, and sometimes at one point in time, we may have chosen to suppress or try to get rid of them. Say we're in an environment when we feel like, say, feeling how sad people are or how angry they are, and you can feel it in their emotional body. Their emotional bodies can be screaming, and then they have just themselves suppressed the emotional body with, information for whatever reason at some point in the past. And then they're like, I'm fine, everything's okay. And then if we feel the sadness and the anger, then there'll be this discrepancy, right? There'll be what's called discordance. And when our bodies become this they're basically a sensory organism that give us information. So when there's a discord between what someone's speaking and what's really going on for them, my body, it reads in the field and it kind of jolts me. And I've gained greater mastery, so it's not as much of a burden. It's more something I really just turn on and tune into in session, and otherwise have learned ways of just expanding my field and having allowance and basically finding different ways to cope with the gift when it wasn't appropriate to use it because it wasn't being asked for or requested. I mean, one thing I'm grateful for in regards to that is I've finally embraced and say, this is an ability I have. I sense discordance. I can tell whether someone's speaking what's true for them, or or they're trying to believe it, but it's not really what's going on, right? They're actually angry, but they're like, I'm great. And I'm like, right? Because before I was prompted to like doubt myself, or, oh, maybe I'm just reading into it too much. Or sometimes we can be accused of that from people if we do voice it at some point and say, hey, I really am sensing a lot of sadness. Is that something that's going on for you? And if they're like, no, what are you talking about? Then often we go inward and go, oh, oops, I was wrong. And then it triggers our imprint of shame and the sense of feeling inherently wrong because our gifts haven't been embraced. And so it does take a lot of commitment to say, okay, I'm choosing to embrace these gifts, releasing everywhere they've been a burden to me, really acknowledging how beautiful they are and how they are part of creating these new partnerships and this new world that is where we feel safe, right? Because what happens with so much discord, with someone saying, I'm fine when they're really pissed, is that it creates this sense of, I don't feel safe because this person doesn't know how angry they are. So in any moment, something could trigger and then they rage at me, right? So a lot of times it's just to feel safe, right? And I know in these recent years, especially as I've lined up with more people who have embraced, their inner world and got more clear on what's really going on for them, is I feel safer. Like my physiology relaxes because if they know what's going on inside them, I'm okay. But if they don't know, and there's a lot of discord, then as we know, like anything could, quote, happen that could set them off, and then that energy could be directed towards us. So then we become some sort of target for their suppressed rage or hurt or whatever. So the big question becomes, how do we essentially thaw from the suppression and the constriction to feel a sense of freedom, to begin to trust ourselves, trust what we feel, trust what we know, trust our heart again, and begin to express and create from that space.
Mm-hmm. And I think a word that's coming to me right now, and I think this is a huge one for a lot of people who are doing work that you could label, I guess, as healing work or spiritual guidance type work. I think a theme that keeps coming up for me is the theme of non-attachment to the outcome of anything. It's almost like I'm the messenger here. If you want to take what I'm sharing with you and use it to help yourself, great. If it's not received at all, or it's deflected, or it's ignored, or it's brushed aside, I just brought the message, and that's okay. And so that's something that I've been working with quite a lot, probably in the last year especially. And yeah, sometimes people really want to hear what the observations or what the messages are, and they're really excited. And sometimes they hear them and might have a hesitation initially, but then might embrace it later and come back and be like, hey, remember when you told me that thing? Well, I really considered it, and I've made some adjustments in my life, and I'm so grateful. Other people might hear what I have to share and be like, you're bleeping crazy. And I'm like, okay, thank you. And so like you said, there's that sort of concern about, is it safe to express what I'm observing here? And the other word besides non-attachment that comes to me is intention. And, checking in with ourselves as the messengers, saying, what is my intention by sharing this information with this person? And for me, I often check in with myself, and the answer is, I just want to see everyone happier and healthier and more vibrant and joyful and in a place of love in their heart center. And, is what I have to share with this person potentially going to help them get to that place? Yeah, it potentially might. So as long as we're all checking in with our intentions and really being unattached to the outcome of our quote unquote work, I think to me, those are two things that just came in as really important to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes we can get caught on, oh, I've done so much work, or in the moment when we feel like we finally got it, that's when it is a moment to really surrender and release the attachment to that concept, right? Because ultimately there is nothing to get. And we are on an adventure of being and knowing thyself, and expansion and all sorts of other words I could name there. But yeah, often when it's like, oh no, I'm clear, I'm being authentic. And if there's any holding or tension, it's just a sign that there's something else that could, come forth to really, release and relax the nervous system, allow for the full breath, and allow just for that freedom of expression. I know that's been such a thing for me is freedom of expression, feeling safe, and having healthy boundaries. And that's a word I resisted for a number of years because I didn't really understand it. To me, it felt like a wall. I'm like, well, we're heading for oneness. Why would I want boundaries? But what I really realized is all as a boundary is just where one thing ends and another begins. So, and all it is the willingness for difference. Like I can feel happy and someone else can feel sad, right? I can feel sad and someone else can feel happy. But what's occurred for many of us is we've been in environments where it hasn't been okay to feel or think something different than those around us. And we've been, a threat to their experience, or there just has to be this, let's all get on the same page or feel and think the same. And I do think it's a sign of the times when we can really allow for that difference, right? Allow for the difference in response patterns, allow just for us to have a unique experience, right? It's okay if I feel sad, it's okay for someone next to me to feel joyful, and I can celebrate their joy and honor my sadness, rather than them trying to get me out of my sadness so we can all be joyful together, or them not getting to continue to be joyful because they have to drop in and be there in my sadness. I think that feels like another aspect of our progression, maybe not totally in line with our, topic today, but I do think it branches in, just like how can we really support each other through these times of becoming more clear, enjoying communication and enjoying relationships. Because I think there may be a number of us through these times of transition that are where relationships are a little bit clunky, because some are in service to honesty, authenticity, integrity, moving forward, awakening. And then others are more in the middle ground of, well, we have common interests, right? But if both parties aren't committed and saying yes and giving each other permission, right, to see into each other and the permission to have that level of intimacy, then if anything, the gifts become a burden and become always having to moderate basically within to ensure that you don't say too much.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the challenges with humans in my observation is it all boils down to relationships a lot of the time, rarely is there an issue that comes up with someone unless maybe it's their own physical health. Most of the time when people are having major challenges in life, it has to do with others. It's not usually about, I have this challenge and it's all mine. It's usually, I have this challenge and it's all these other people around me. And it's easy to go there. It's a tendency that we have as humans to want to point any blame or discord, as you said, toward other people. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I would just invite all of us to look at our relationships, especially the ones that are a big part of our daily lives, and ask ourselves how we can gently move toward more, I guess, deeper connections, more truth, more honesty, more vulnerability, more authenticity, asking for what we need and saying how we feel. And those, you can start small. You don't have to just like dump the mother load on anyone. You can just like start with something small that might be achievable for others to receive. And I think the other really important part of this is that we ourselves are open to receiving these things from others, because I don't think it ever finishes, and we're never done, and there's always more we can learn and more growth we can do and more layers we can peel off. So I think just that openness, just that concept of openness to shift and openness to change is what I feel I need in my life. And I'm grateful to be hearing myself saying this out loud, because I do need to hear it from myself out loud sometimes, as a loving and gentle reminder back toward who I am and who I want to be, and what I'm here to share in this lifetime. So thanks for being a part of this conversation, Christine.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And I would just, add to that in saying that a lot of what we carry is not unique to us. I mean, there are core wounds of humanity, the shame, the denial, the guilt, the blame, all of those, are across the board. We carry different amounts of that, like core human wounding and, and trauma, and a lot of patterns we develop just to cope with our environment. And so in one sense, just acknowledging what we carry, and it's personal to the extent we've adopted it as mine, but it's really not personal. So it's just about handling and bringing awareness and attention to what we carry. And especially when we're with others, I know more and more as I've, come into my own, so to speak, then when I'm with people, I can just see that what they're carrying, rather than being like, you have an issue. I'm just like, you are being here, and this is one of the patterns that I'm seeing that you're carrying. And that level of disidentification allows us to honor the being while acknowledging what we could define as a limitation or something that doesn't serve us, in the intention of being more free and loved and feeling safe and supported and flourishing. And so that can be a really great practice within ourselves and others to just disidentify and be like, yep, I carry this pattern. I acknowledge it's here. I acknowledge the propensity for shame or for blame or for guilt. And then we can ask for help and really receive the support and tools that we need to be able to expand, trust ourselves, trust life more, and come into greater intimacy and relationships. So I'm grateful to be having this conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us for the 10th episode of Walking the Path. Thank you, Kristin, for being here with me. And I wonder how much more we can step into now and really drop into the intimacy and depth of relating and trust in life, and really step into a new world. As this one falls apart, more can come together and more of us can come together. So thank you.
We're all on the same team, and I think that's the thing that's really ultimately important here. So
yeah,
thanks for being on this team, Christine, and how many others are on this team, really.
Yeah, and how much more can we just meet each other and being like, oh, here you are.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the only ones. And anytime we feel like I'm the only one who's waking up, or I'm the only one who seems to want to be authentic, it's like there's so many. And as we meet, we'll know that, and then see our own reflection and really see the love and authenticity reflected back to us, and how much more can we celebrate those coming meetings even right now. So thank you, everyone.